After seemingly teeing up a potentially mouthwatering end to the current WSL campaign, the league and the teams inside it decided to make a fool out of me by deciding to give us a quite rather unresounding and quite flat ending to the title race. As of course, this past week in the WSL, Arsenal came up short and in turn handed the title over to Manchester City. Welcome back to Mikla Papillon, and let's get right into it. Now, before we get to the moment that you're all waiting for, which is basically my little rant about how Arsenal just slipped at the final hurdle, and at least with regards to catching up with Manchester City, I'm going to do what I've always done when it comes to these video formats, and that's begin at the start of the weekend. And that, of course, means we go to the home of Manchester United, where they hosted Brighton and Hove Albion, who obviously, for what was not going to be the last time, were going to rain on some top contenders, shall we say. In this scenario particularly, Manchester United, as I said in the previous video, they no longer had UWCL qualification in their own hands and had to rely on pretty much either Arsenal or Chelsea dropping form miraculously out of nowhere for them to just have a sliver of a hope to qualify for next season's Champions League. And of course, Brighton, not really fighting for anything, they just decided, we're just gonna rain on your parade, and that's exactly what happened. The match started out quite tense in a way, but Man U, to their credit, they were much improved from their game last week against Spurs, but unfortunately, despite those improvements, they would soon be behind in the game after Jelena Cankovic scored in the 39th minute to give the Seagulls the early lead. And the second half was pretty much more of the same in the sense that United were dominant on the ball, but Brighton were just as resilient in defending any chance that United tried to carve up to get themselves back on level terms. And just as it seemed that Brighton were about to sneak away with the 3 points, United did finally get a chance to level thanks to Lea Shula, who scored deep into stoppage time to, of course, rescue the Red Devils and make sure that the points would be shared between both United and Brighton. Rolling on to Sunday, and we began with a London derby, this time between Tottenham Hotspur and the London City Lionesses. Who would have known? And in this game, it was pretty much full steam ahead for Spurs, where after an inspired performance against Man U that unfortunately didn't yield all 3 points for the Lily Whites, going into this game where they were again at home, they were much more clinical in front of goal, with none other than Senior Gopset, in my view, young player of the season for the WSL this season. Personally, that's just me, don't shoot me. She opened up the scoring for the Lily Whites to give them the early lead, and that lead would be doubled just 15 minutes later thanks to Olivia Holt, and Spurs were just in total control of this game throughout its entirety. The Lionesses, despite their best attempts, they really couldn't get things going in spite of their efforts, and I guess when it comes to their victory against Leicester City last week, they really couldn't build up on that because they were facing a team that was much more well-rounded and much more cohesive, shall we say. And it showed, as even towards the end, Alana Kennedy did manage to get one back for the Lionesses, but it did end up turning into just nothing more than a consolation goal, with Spurs taking all 3 points in what was a very, very good performance and victory for the Lily Whites, much deserved in my view personally. Next, we head to the King Power Stadium where Leicester City hosted former WSL champions Chelsea, and like a lamb to the slaughter, this game was only going one way, and that one way was Chelsea dominating and eventually beating Leicester. But I think this time the scoreline was quite respectable, if you can even term it that way, for the Foxes, who lost out 3-1 to the Blues, with Sam Kerr and Lauren James with a brace scoring for the former champions, and Shannon O'Brien making it 2 goals in 2 games for the Foxes. And it was just one of those games where, just seeing it on paper, you already know what's going to happen. There was absolutely no room for surprises. Chelsea were very professional in their approach. They want to automatically qualify for next season's Champions League. They want to go to the playoff route. But for Leicester, it was expected. They're at the bottom for a reason, as cruel as that sounds. and they really didn't offer much in this game. And now that they've been confirmed to be in the relegation playoff, they will be facing Charlton Athletic. So maybe, hopefully, that can be a little silver lining for the Foxes, provided that they do beat Charlton in the end. But we'll see in a few weeks. In what was, in my view, the most entertaining game of the week, Aston Villa welcomed West Ham to the Midlands, and this was just a very nice match. It was a war of attrition where Aston Villa came upon the West Ham defense, which, as noted last week, was very superb and impervious against Liverpool, and the same rang true in this game against Aston Villa, who, despite having the likes of Salmon and eventually towards the end of the game Rachel Daly bearing down upon the Hammers defense, the latter just were resilient. They refused to let anything in, and for the moments that they had the ball and could attack, they were just as decisive as Aston Villa were. But in the end, it would be the Hammers who just had that little extra bit of firepower that was more than enough to give the Hammers not only the 3 points, but 3 points with 2 goals, courtesy of Rico Ueki and Serena Pubel, very much in the dying embers of the match, with Ueki opening the scoring in the 86th minute and Pubel getting the second for the Hammers in extra time. This was a very fun match to watch. If you can't watch the whole thing, of course the highlights video is right there. You'll just see it was just 10 minutes of enjoyable football, and I think by far and away, if it wasn't for this game, we would not have had as much of an entertaining weekend of the WSL. But again, that's just my opinion, but it was very fun. The West Ham, they were very well organized, but for Aston Villa, I think they'll feel a little bit hard done by because they put in a very good performance by themselves, but were unfortunate to not get anything out of it in the end. The penultimate game of the week came at the Joy Stadium in Manchester, where Manchester City welcomed Liverpool, and in this game, it was another war of attrition, but less entertaining. It was just a situation where Liverpool, they knew that they were playing against a team that was superior to them, so they were more than happy to just sit back and just defend for their lives or frustrate City. And then City, of course, they were looking to bounce back from their setback against Brighton in what would ultimately, in hindsight, be the game that they won the WSL from their own merit. And this game, again, it was just kind of there. City, not for a lack of trying, just struggled to break open the deadlock, despite the likes of Shaw and Fujino doing their best to get things going. And Liverpool, they had their own chances, but at the same time, they weren't really all that bothered or alert to them, or even worried about taking them for that fact. So it was just there. And it looked for a moment, a very good moment, as if Man City were going to suffer yet another setback in their coronation of the WSL title. That would be up until the end, where yet another injury time winner would come courtesy of Rebecca Kanak, who would score from a header to give City the 3 points and ultimately be more than enough to crown them champions for this WSL season. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. Brighton versus Arsenal. Now, we'll never know what caused Arsenal to come up with such a shocking performance. If it was the rotated team that they fielded, even though Brighton themselves fielded a rotated team. If it was the fact that Brighton are just Arsenal's bogey team, which is just true. If it's Arsenal just reeling from their exit and defeat from the Champions League, courtesy of Olympique Lyonnais, we'll never know. We will just never truly know. But what we do know is that in this game, Arsenal took their sweet time to get into gear and to get the ball rolling. Whereas Brighton, they took advantage of that. They were warm, they were ready, and they got going right from the word go. And the Seagulls, it took them a while, but they would open up the scoring the 43rd minute of the game, as even though they were not in control of the game with regard to possession or passes or anything, and Arsenal were dominating on that side, the Seagulls were doing their usual tactic where they absorb the pressure, and when the opportunity opens up, they just carve you up, and if the opportunity presents itself in front of goal, they shoot, and if the net ripples, That's it, and that's exactly what happened with Tsunoda getting the opener for the game. And going into the second half, Arsenal were reeling. It was nice to see that in this second 45, Arsenal did wake up. It seemed that the goal that they conceded managed to sober them up. This was reminiscent of Brighton's game against Manchester City, of course, last week. Except in this time round, Brighton didn't go further ahead. Arsenal would manage to draw them back with freedom on them, getting the leveler for Arsenal in the 62nd minute. And from this point on, Arsenal had fully waken up and they had 28 minutes to get something. Because, of course, at the time, nothing short of 3 points was going to keep them in contention for the title, even though it was quite fleeting to begin with. But for Arsenal, despite their best attempts to get a second goal, Brighton stood strong at the back. They were resilient throughout, and from the 85th minute right up until the very end, Arsenal threw everything at the wall in the hopes that something would stick. But Brighton, they just made sure that they had put some grease on the wall and made sure that nothing would stick. It would just quickly slide off, and that's how it would end come the final whistle, with Arsenal sharing the points with Brighton again. Brighton played party pooper once more and effectively handing the WSL title over to Manchester City come the end of the night. And with the game week finishing this weekend, there's really no WSL football that's on, and it's the same for next week. It's really just Arsenal playing their games in hand. Now the Gunners, they're just fighting to get automatic qualification into the Women's Champions League for next season, because of course the title has eluded them by the skin of their teeth. Thank you, Brighton. And as for the lay of the land everywhere else in the WSL, there's pretty much nothing interesting to talk about or look at, if I'm being honest, except maybe the WSL qualification hopes of Arsenal and Chelsea. Currently, as it looks, between the two sides, Arsenal are 4 points behind Chelsea, and they've got 2 games in hand, of course, whereas Chelsea have 1 more game. Chelsea, the highest points that they can finish off with is 49 points, whereas for Arsenal, with the 3 games that they have left, they can finish off with a total of 51 points. So it's looking potentially likely for Arsenal to end up getting automatic qualification, but of course they have to be perfect in their last few matches, which are not going to be any pushovers by any chance, because in these final games Arsenal do travel to Aston Villa, who last season walloped them quite emphatically, and then Everton before rounding it off with a trip to Liverpool. So it's not looking to be like the easiest of run-ins for Arsenal, but they can hope, because on the other side of the coin, Chelsea do face off against Manchester United, so anything could happen with regards to automatic Champions League qualification. And that is going to be it for today's video. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed any of these matches from this past week of the WSL weekend. What are your thoughts on Manchester City being crowned WSL champions for the first time in 10 years? And do you think that Arsenal will manage to get automatic qualification into the Women's Champions League for next season? Let me know all of that and anything else in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.